right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Accented. Tonight, we are going to have the honor of speaking with Chef Tu David Phu and Chef Anh Luu. This is our 42nd episode, Flavors of the Diaspora, Rising Vietnamese American Chefs. Good to meet y'all. If you haven't already, drop what you're eating tonight for dinner in the chat. Let's get some vibes and engagement going. My name is Philip Nguyen, and I am your co-host, MC slash hype man for tonight's Accented Dialogues in Diaspora show that's presented by the Diasporic Vietnamese Artist Network, or DVAN. Y'all can learn more about DVAN by visiting our website at dvan.org. But if you didn't know, DVAN's mission is to foster diasporic Vietnamese and Southeast Asian literary voices. We empower artists. Uh, we empower artists in the diaspora and champion our complex and diverse stories. We are refugees, immigrants, survivors, and descendants, and know that our stories must be heard. And if you like what you're hearing, please consider donating to support us. You can visit dvan.org/donate. You can also visit the DVAN website. There's like a tab up top that says Accented. You can check out any of our previous shows. And if you didn't know, the recording of this show and all of our previous Accenteds are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you listen to podcasts as podcasts. So you can always hang out with us there too. This show wouldn't be possible without our sponsor, AppLovin. AppLovin's leading marketing platform provides developers a powerful set of solutions to grow their mobile apps. AppLovin's technology platform enables developers to market, monetize, analyze, and publish their apps. The company's first-party content includes over 200 popular, engaging apps, and its technology brings that content to millions of users around the world, just like how we're bringing, hopefully, diasporic Vietnamese and Southeast Asian arts to eventually millions of people around the world. AppLovin is headquartered in Palo Alto, California, with several offices globally, and you can learn more at applovin.com. We'll also have a survey at the end of the show. If y'all can help us fill that out, it helps us get grant funding. We're always looking for sponsors. If anyone has a contact with Hennessy, let us know. Or if you just are interested in supporting, be sure to follow us our website or on Instagram at weare_dvan. I have the honor now, this is our 42nd show, to introduce my co-host, Mr. Viet Thanh Nguyen, whose novel, The Sympathizer, won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction. His most recent books are Simone, a children's book illustrated by Minnie Fan, and A Man of Two Faces, a memoir, a history, a memorial. He's also the editor of The Displaced, Refugee Writers on Refugee Lives, and one of the co-founders of the Diasporic Vietnamese Artist Network. Welcome back, Viet, to Accented.
Hey, Philip, great to be back here with you and with everybody out there listening to us or watching us. I have the pleasure of introducing two amazing chefs tonight. The first is Chef Tu David Phu, recognized as a San Francisco Chronicle Rising Star chef. He is a two-time TEDx speaker, top shelf alumnus, acclaimed cookbook author, and storyteller. Growing up in Oakland, he began his culinary journey in his mother's apartment garden, ultimately advancing to some of the world's top kitchens. His path has brought him to GiGi's, a Vietnamese-inspired wine bar in San Francisco, and inspired his Emmy-nominated PBS film Bloodline. Chef Tu, welcome to the show. He'll be with us. There he is right now.
Hey, what's up,
Handsome one.
Viet?
Hey, man, good to have you with us.
What's up, Viet? What's up, DVAN family? I'm super stoked to be here. This is my second showing, so all love, all support, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. We'll just have to imagine the sense of the kitchen as we talk to both you and our next guest, Chef Anh Luu, who is the owner of Busy Bee LLC, a company that specializes in private dinners, culinary consulting, and catering events with her Vietnamese street food pop-up Sang No La. Chef Anh has earned notoriety by appearing on Food Network's Chopped, Food Network's Grill Dads, Portland Cook's Cookbook, and she went viral with her Pho-rito pop-ups. She most recently appeared as a hero in an episode of the Emmy award-winning Netflix show Queer Eye.
Hi, Viet. Hi, Chef Two. How are you guys?
Well, I'm feeling hungry already, which is probably a good sign. Just like reading your bios, looking at your faces, knowing what you two have done has made me desire Vietnamese food, especially the variations that you two have come up with. So let's start with the beginnings. Like, what turned you on to becoming chefs? What's the origin story that turned you into the people we have here today? Let's start with you, Anh. How did you get started?
I started really young. I was born and raised here in New Orleans. My mom was sort of the chef of the whole family. My family and my dad's little sister's family, we were all here in New Orleans together, and my mom was the chef of our family. And so I would help her cook, and she would cook dinner from scratch every night. And I just really was enthralled with it. And I started cooking at the age of 16. I got my first job at a small Southwest Grill restaurant here in New Orleans called Vaqueros. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was my first real line cooking job, and I was a junior in high school. So from there, I went to pizza. I did pizza for a while. And then after Hurricane Katrina, it took me to Portland, Oregon, where I then attended culinary school. And then I lived there for 12 years and really honed my cooking skills in a restaurant up there.
Is there a certain dish or ingredient that really pulled you into cooking?
I feel like just seafood in general. My uncle was a deep sea fisherman out of New Orleans. He was a fisherman in Vietnam too before he came here. And we just had a lot of backyard barbecues by the pool with all seafood. He would bring in his fresh catch, and my mom would cook it up. And it's a really big reason why I moved back to New Orleans after being in Portland for so long, too.
Uh, well,
Yeah.
Chef Du, what about you? What's your origin story? Because I know you have a fascinating one.
I was a fat little boy. That's where the love for food started. And as a fat little boy, I would watch and my mom cook in the kitchen, and she would teach me layers of flavors because that was my safe space. That was my place of joy. And for context, too, I grew up in West Oakland. It was a food insecure community. We were food insecure at the time, and I watched my mother and father work magic in the kitchen. Um, with the little food and money that they had. And I think that inspired me most as a chef is that watching that sort of creative process from a place of scarcity. But yeah, I cooked a lot with my mom, and I did so not just only because I love food, but it gave me an insight to who they were and who they are as people. And I think those are rare moments where we don't, we see our parents as like these godlike figures, but to see them as people and hear about stories, how they fall in love and how they met, like that was the thing for me that kind of got me locked in, got me hands all in, in food. So
And is there like a dish that they made or that you ate with them or some kind of ingredient that you really, that triggers you in a positive way?
well, this triggered me. It's funny that you asked that. This triggers me in this used to trigger me in a bad way, but I love it now. But my parents would always used to make ganjul, and I used to hate ganjul. Like, I was like, because as a kid, you want pizza and burgers. And for those non-Vietnamese folks on the call, ganjul it just means sour soup. And some people call it sour and sweet soup. I call it a study of sour because it translates to sour soup. Because you see all the different elements of sour, tomato, tamarind, pineapple. Recruit lime leaf, lemongrass, all the above, right? And I used to dislike it because my dad would bring home leftover fish scraps from his job as a fishmonger, and I thought that was unworthy for us to eat. But I'm learning that, you know, my parents took what people threw away and made it into gold. So mhm.
I like how
I
both of
love it
y'all
now, by
brought
the way.
up
I love it now, by the way. I'm just saying. Let me clear that
Yeah.
ganjul.
up. Yeah, I
What
love
kind of
Contour
fish are you
now.
throwing in your ganjul though, Chef Thu?
Bro, salmon fish heads. That's where it's at, bro. And I eat the
Hmm.
eyeball.
Mm. That usually I mean that's a delicacy, but save for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who grew up with a lot of lao and like whatever fish was at Costco or at the market, like nearby available, or fish that we'd put into the back of the trunk and like pack it in ice and then drive it like an hour and a half back up north. I feel like Talking about fish is getting me hella excited, not only excited but hungry. I mean, both of y'all brought up like where the people that you came from. This first question that we have on Accented around origin stories is actually inspired by T Bui, The Best We Could Do. She talks about understanding her parents better in order to learn to love them better. I want to pass this back to you, Chef An, especially since shout outs to T. I think she's in NOLA right now.
Yeah, she's
But
a friend of mine. I know her. Yeah.
yeah, can you talk a
Yeah,
little
we're
bit
good
more about that?
friends.
Like the people that you come from, the community, how it informed like your own cooking, even after like being like through movement and then through being
Yeah.
displaced.
So one of the main reasons why I moved back home was to reconnect with my Vietnamese community here. Growing up, my parents sent me to an all kind of white kid private school here. So in my younger years, I really wasn't surrounded by many Vietnamese people, and I was always like labeled the white girl, you know. And so after my mom passed away in 2017, I was owning my restaurant. I was not dealing with my grief very well, and I knew that I needed to come back to New Orleans to feel connected to her and my Vietnamese roots again. So I reconnected with some of my old classmates from high school who are Vietnamese, one of which is Kai Nguyen. He is the director of the Veggie Farm Co-op, which is a Vietnamese farmers co-op that was created after the BP oil spill for the fishermen that lost all of their work because they couldn't go fishing anymore. So they wanted to give them another job. So they created this farmers co-op, and I love being involved with them. I work with their produce as much as I can. I go out to the farm sometimes to hang out and talk to the farmers. And I just it's right across the street from the Mary Queen of Vietnam Church, where the Tết Festival here happens every year. So New Orleans East is kind of the Vietnamese neighborhood of New Orleans. And that is kind of like where I find myself a lot, like just going to the little grocery stores that are there. There's a very famous bakery here called Dong Phuong Bakery. They're James Beard Award winning. They're in the East, right in that little stretch. So yeah, I find that the Vietnamese community here we're all super close. I feel like I know them all. We're in a WhatsApp chat together called the Viet Crew with a K. And it's just really amazing to be able to reconnect with my Vietnamese roots coming back here and meeting people like Thi Bui. I met her a couple years ago when she moved here, and she's incredible. I'm actually going to be in Vietnam with her for her birthday in January. Um, but yeah, I after talking to her, she was telling me that the Vietnamese community here feels just a little bit closer and tighter than the West Coast because it's just a bigger place, you know. It's just more spread out. New Orleans is a lot smaller than people think it is. So we're all able to interact with each other, meet up, hang out, and it's been awesome. And like to share Vietnamese food with other Vietnamese people is for me a really special experience that I really didn't get a lot like growing up and after my mom died and our family gatherings stopped as much. It's like that that yearning for Vietnamese community and food at the same time is like what really brought me back here.
Thanks for sharing that and dropping
Yeah.
the lore, the background context. I think
Yeah.
like trying to find Viet community in like traditionally non-Viet spaces. I mean, you talking about that festival really like brings it home. Chef
Yeah.
Do, Oakland, West Oakland, particularly Viet community, the diaspora. I mean, a lot of what you're doing now, like we were able to see I mean, I see it on my TikTok algorithm. We've done a couple of community events out together out here, but can you share a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, I've been on quite a bit of a journey. Chef An, like I said, I feel the connection between you and I because it seems like we have similar journeys. It seems that our food was rooted from our mothers and from our families, which most of us are. But
Yeah.
me, pop-ups too. Like I got I turned 30 and I went through some yeah, I was went to culinary school right out of high school, thought I wanted to be white, did the whole French Italian thing, loved it until I hit a brick wall. I hit a brick wall and they said, hey, I just happen to have soy sauce on the menu because I inherited soy sauce from the previous chef's menu. You don't need to look up the restaurant. I don't need to say it, but the owner came to me and said, hey, this is not an Asian restaurant, so you need to take the Asian ingredients off of the menu. I'm like, I'm just using what your previous chef used. What? Why is the
Ew.
context different? So I think that lit a fire under me to go. I wanted to dig deeper to why he felt so threatened or what that meant to him, what Asian food meant to him. I didn't know what Asian food meant to me. Right. And it goes further back to me having conversations with my mom and like, why did you use these ingredients? We're Vietnamese. Why are there Korean ingredients in our pantry? And like
Mhm.
that whole spew of diaspora and what that conversation means. And I love what you were saying on was like, you're Vietnamese, but small knit community Vietnamese in NOLA. That's such a specific thing,
Yeah.
right? That you can't find anywhere else. And it's the way that it touches your heart and soul. And I
Yeah.
wanted to have that for me was like, what made me so special? Why was I cooking the way that I have? Why do I prefer fish, compared to people in mainland Vietnam, Central? I'm from the coast, they're from Hue and Central, and they like to eat beef. Like, not that
Right.
one's better than the other, but why are there so clear line differences? Why
Yeah.
do we cry over gak hot though so much, right?
Because it's so good.
I think there's a story, like I have it in my cookbook. But I think eh, just tapping into that, like learning what our identities are more than just what's in our bloodline, our traditional heritages, but of course the shit that we go through. And
Mhm.
all cultures of the world, but I think Vietnamese people haven't been afforded, at least up until recently. Um, thank you, sympathizer, right? For having
Yeah.
complex identities and going through a lot of shit, or people even understanding there was more than one goddamn Vietnamese American war, right? There were multiple
Mhm.
Vietnamese wars. We have gone through famine for a long ass fucking time, right? And
Yeah.
that kind
Yeah.
of construed the way we eat, right? Not just in Vietnam, but abroad. Sorry, I could go on
Mhm.
forever. I'm gonna shut up now. Like this.
No, but this is great. It triggers so many ideas for me. And one thing that happened a few years ago was that I was in a Providence, Rhode Island fancy restaurant, some kind of European or continental thing, and I had fish, and it was so bland. And I just said to my table mates, I wish they had, I wish they had. They were not Vietnamese. I wish they had fish sauce here.
Yeah.
And the waiter overheard me and was like, "Oh, we have that." And so he brought out a bottle of fish sauce, this white guy. And I was like, oh,
Okay.
we've started to make an impact because now in this
Mhm.
generically white restaurant, they actually have this in the back somewhere as a condiment. So in some
Mm.
ways, we've
Yes.
obviously made inroads in Vietnamese cuisine, and certain foods have become very fashionable, as we'll discuss. But much of what the two of you have said is that obviously food is completely wrapped up in history and memory and culture, in our families, in our bodies, in our poverty, in the way we were raised, and all of that. And I remember growing up, we ate Vietnamese food at home because we were Vietnamese, but it's not the Vietnamese food you see in restaurants. So sometimes it was like the
Mhm.
gà kho đồ or canh chua, yeah, my parents did that. But sometimes it was extremely basic. My parents would come home from working 12 to 14-hour days in the grocery store. They didn't have time to
Mhm.
cook. So they would just boil like offal. Like I remember growing up on intestine, on
Mhm.
tripe,
Yes.
liver,
Long. Yes.
on beef tongue. This is all stuff they could just find, organ meats and stuff they could find, and they could just boil it and they'd serve it with a nuc chấm, dipping sauce. That was very,
Mhm.
very simple.
Mhm.
Okay. So for me now, this is a taste of memory. So when I get a whole chicken from the market, I'll roast it, but I will save the liver and the heart and so on. And when my son won't eat these things, but my daughter is willing to try the heart, heart of the chicken. For me, this
Yeah.
brings back all these memories of growing up, right? And my father, I'll never forget this moment, 10 or 15 years ago, he's already retired, and he boils or steams manioc. I don't know how many people have had manioc. It's a tuber or a root, a potato. People ate
Okay.
this when they didn't have rice.
You have a Vietnamese name for that, Viet?
Sun or khoai mi. And
Mm.
Khoai mei,
Okay.
Banh
yes, khoai
mi.
Okay.
Okay,
mei.
there you go. I
right,
was like manioc.
Yeah,
okay.
a
And
manic.
I
manioc
know.
is like the
I
English word for it that you'll find in books. But the point is, my parents grew up in the 1930s and 1940s in northern Vietnam. They lived through the famine that killed like a
Mm.
million people in 1944 to 1945. This is what people ate because they didn't have
Wow.
rice. And so he made this a couple of times. He would just eat it. He'd offer it to me, and I was like, this is it's very bland if you've ever had it. But he ate it, and this like look came into his eyes of whatever he was remembering from his childhood. And I have no idea what that was. So that's the long lead up to the question. What food for you does that? What is your Proust had his mad line that brings back all these memories when his narrator tasted it. What food when you taste it brings back overwhelming memories for you? Anne.
Really simple stuff, actually. Just like how you said, my mom would boil cabbage and then just in plain water, no seasoning, no salt. And then she would hard boil eggs and crush the hard boiled eggs in fish sauce and then just eat the boiled cabbage dipped in the egg fish sauce mixture and rice. And I find myself doing that a lot for a quick meal when I'm tired from a long day. Like I'll have a whole cabbage in I always have a whole cabbage in my fridge. So
Mm.
that's the easiest thing. Boiled cabbage, fish sauce with a hard boiled egg crushed up in it, and rice. And like the combo of those flavors reminds me of like my mom so much. And like it's so simple, but that was her favorite snack. That is like what she used to feed me sometimes after school if she couldn't cook or something. But yeah, I don't know if anybody else ate that growing up, but that's what I ate.
So what about you? A food that brings back
Um,
memory.
it's the memory of taste. Um,
That, by the
I
way,
think
The Memory of Taste is the title of Chef Du David Phu's cookbook that he did. We'll talk a little bit about that as well.
yes, and then shout out to Soleil, my co-author. Soleil is on in the chat as well. Hi, Soleil.
Oh, Soleil, hi.
So
I was on her
Soleil Ho,
podcast.
who is San Francisco Chronicle's food critic, but more than that, a cultural critic, in my opinion. But yes, that was a great collaboration. Chef Du
Yes.
David Phu, what brings back memory for you?
Um, I think I mentioned that I grew up food insecure, and what that meant was that when I opened up the fridge, there wasn't much in there. What that meant is that if your stomach's hurting, your mom tells you to drink water. What that means is, um, I ate so much rice that I have digestive issues as an adult, right? So that's what food insecurity is. So when people ask, when I say that, and just to elaborate, people don't know what that means, so I'm just further elaborating. And I'm just learning that recently. So, what she would do if when my father couldn't supplement our meals with fish scraps, she would go to a butcher's counter. And back in the 90s, you can get chicken bones for free, like at any butcher market. They didn't sell it back then. They would just put it in bags, put it in ice, you can go grab it. My mom would grab the bare chicken carcass bone. She'd make a simple soup out of it. And that's what I would end up coming home to when she was at work after school. And I would suck all the meat off all the bones. When she would have vegetables like daikon and carrot, I would notice the subtle differences of how carrots and daikon would impart into the broth. And I think that's contributed to me greatly in a positive way as a chef because I'm really good at making soups and sauces. And I can tell what celery does to a soup, what carrot does to soup, what onion does to the soup, because I know the absence of those ingredients. So for me, it gets me emotional. And I wouldn't say I'm a tyrant in the kitchen, but when it comes to food waste, I am because I know what it is not to have those things. So I think for me, that was uh, a memory that's been ingrained in my heart and soul forever. So
Well, so much interesting food is actually born out of food insecurity and desperation, as you said, right? I mean, if you go to Korea, they have they call camp stew, based
that's
on all
right.
the leftovers that the Koreans had to scrounge out of U.S. Army bases and make a stew, and now you can eat it in restaurant as a kind of nostalgia food to what life used to be like for Koreans. And there's rumors that pho was invented by refugees, and who had to make do with beef bones. But now,
Mhm.
we've all lived long enough in the United States to see this transition for Vietnamese food going from being something that no one except Vietnamese people ate to being something that in certain cases has now become fashionable, or at least basic. So now people think, non-Vietnamese people think they know what pho is. They'll say pho, they'll say pho. I'm like, I'm sort of halfway grateful. I'm like, okay, at least you got but you have to go pho, you have to go all the way, right? So we're still not there yet. And banh mi is fashionable now. Certain things are fashionable now. And some Vietnamese restaurants are starting to become, famous and notable and so on. I'm wondering, how you feel about this transition from 20 or 30 years ago when Vietnamese food was really just for Vietnamese people to a moment now where it seems that Vietnamese food is on the brink of a great degree of recognition and quote unquote mainstream acceptability, whatever that means to you. And how do you feel?
I love it. We all grew up in going to those all Vietnamese restaurants seemed like little kind of hole in the walls, kind of just like all the supplies stacked in the room where the tables were, no decorations really, you know what I mean? So I feel like having non-Vietnamese people wanting to cook Vietnamese food and really delve into it and not just make pho or banh mi or something, but like really delve into the specialties of the different regions and everything. I feel good about it, but it's also I feel judgy sometimes because when non-Vietnamese people are cooking Vietnamese food, there's just a little bit more care that you have to take because Vietnamese food is so nuanced and complex and layered. And it's not just putting fish sauce in something that makes it Vietnamese, you know? Yeah, but I like that it's like so widespread. Like Chef Tu said, this like the ingredients, even finding the fish sauce in a random place that serves fish that isn't a Vietnamese restaurant. I think that having non-Vietnamese people cook this food is making me feel more comfortable in the world because I can go somewhere where there's nobody that looks like me, but everybody knows the food that makes me me, you know? So I feel good about it, but I also am so cautious when I try new places that are owned by non-Vietnamese people, I guess.
Well, I will say that whenever I'm cooking, I have my bottle of red boat fish sauce and I'll put it in everything. Making chili,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
gets the fish sauce. I'm making pasta sauce, gets the fish sauce.
yeah,
I think it tastes better personally, but that's just
yeah.
subconscious working on me. Do how do you feel about this, this idea that Vietnamese food may be getting trendy or at least fashionable and mainstream?
I I I am so in love with our Vietnamese culture and our generation and what we've done and where we're going. The backstories as well too. So in every instance possible within food and outside of food, I want I want Vietnamese people to be able to enterprise and milk and juice every ounce of everything that they worked hard for, right? It's a birthright, it's a heritage. I welcome people into the space because it further grows the understanding of Vietnamese culture. And I don't think it's not a nationalism thing to me. I feel like if once people learn more about us, whether it's through or Vietnamese people through food, culture, a textbook, a movie, a film, a novel, I think as people we start to break down divisive walls and these people just start to understand that um we're part of the same family. For reference, when I used to cook my pop-ups, what's the craziest sort of situation I had was my diners were a lot of them for some reason were war veterans that hadn't gone back to Vietnam and would get my cat called though done in like in a tasting menu way and would cry in my arms and apologize to me as if I was the representation of the hurt and pain of the Vietnam War, right? But I think them having the guy called that I would serve to them, I'll just tell them stories about my family. I think there's a realization there that there is no enemy, they're just people, right? So for me, I see a humanizing element as it grows more. But at the same time, I want it to be protected. So fuck you to whoever tried to was it patent or trademark the name Pho, you know?
Mm. In
Um,
like London or something in the UK, right?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I have a plan to go to the restaurant and take a shit in a flaming bag and put it on their front door, right, and film it. So um I'm ruthless about I'm ruthless about protecting safe and sacred spaces. I feel like being a person of color, being a brown man, being of Vietnamese descent, this for me is something that I want to protect. I feel that I'm not saying people who aren't Vietnamese or people who aren't Asian can cook Asian food, but there's an ethical way to do it. And if you don't know what the ethical way to do it is, get the fuck out of the business. You shouldn't be asking the question in the first place if you're considering it. So, should
You
we
got
have
to
that
do the work.
conversation? Should we have that conversation? Cultural
Yeah.
appropriation conversation?
Yeah, because I think like I mean in the same vein that like we want to be able to see ourselves as in an ethical way as humans in our own humanity. Vietnamese people are also hustlers, bro. Like how are
Mhm.
we gonna make like why are we gonna let non-Viet or like non-Viet folks like charge like $25 for a bowl of pho with like a beef rib on it when you can always get like a bowl of hot and have the see what come out on the side for like free, right? So what's that like for y'all as like both chefs and both people who are like sort of expressing your identity through like the food that you're making, but also as like entrepreneurs, as business owners, as folks that are part of this hustle and grind to like make it, you know?
Well, as I don't know, the rising costs of things is happening. It's just it's hard to make things super duper affordable like they used to be, like the way Vietnamese food used to be priced. All the bowls of pho used to be $10 or under, like when I was growing up in New Orleans, and now a bowl of pho is like $15. I love that there are higher end Vietnamese restaurants for sure, but sometimes it's like, ooh, that is a dish that I'm super familiar with because I'm Vietnamese and I grew up eating it, and I don't want to pay $30 for it at a restaurant. And I'm a chef, so I can like feel like that. I'm not sure if I wasn't a chef, how I'd feel like that. I'd probably just go ahead and pay for it because it would provide, that good feeling of memories through food and all that stuff. But I mean, I think that it's a good thing that Vietnamese food is getting more expensive because it was always worth that in the first place. And I'm glad that people are getting out of the mindset that Vietnamese food is just cheap food that is quick and easy.
Mm-hmm. Chef Thu, how you feel about
Wait,
charging
why you
people?
why are you grinning? Because I'm about to get hella political up on here.
That's what we're here for, like the people got to hear it because we can't like, it's a part of what DVAN is out here trying to do is like to move ourselves from the margins into the mainstream, into the center, right? And that doesn't come without like really recognizing and acknowledging the sort of position, social position, economic position that we've been in. So let's get political, man.
So Lay and I had this conversation in depth, and I have to say I pay a lot of homage to Soleil for, you know, helping me navigate this space and understand a little bit more. But I feel that when we're complaining about each other's prices, brown, black, people of color, everything in between, it's because we fit in this mode of white supremacy, right? It's that when prices go up, keep in mind, no one hurts but poor people, right? And when poor people are just trying to make a fight, trying to make a living, and we're trying to pay for our bills, we complain to each other that our prices, but we have no control of that. Like I just want to be collectively as people of color, marginalized people, that we should stop blaming the restaurants for raising their prices. They're not, I'm telling you, they're not the billionaires of the country. They're not the billionaires of the world, not even close. I think when they're raising their prices, they're just trying to pay equitable wages. They're just trying to pay their taxes. They're just trying to pay for healthcare, right? And oftentimes is mandated on them, which is sometimes a good thing because that way they can take care of their staff. But before that, there was no regulation. You get $10 a bowl because they were paying cash before, just to be transparent,
Mhm.
and they were evading taxes. Do we want our favorite mom and pop Vietnamese businesses to navigate in that way just so we can pay $10?
No.
I would rather pay more for the short term. But the bigger issue is that why is there a record number of billionaires this year, but then we got to pay $30 a bowl, right? Why is there
Right.
75 billionaires in San Francisco and then I got to pay $30 for a burger, right? I think the thing is that the bigger picture for me is that And I think as food people, we see it first, right? If inflation
Mhm.
happens, if all the money gets pushed to the one percenters, we feel it first, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's what the issue is. So I always try to be an ally to restaurant folks because I always see, especially mom and pops, the non-corporate chain ones,
Mhm.
I don't feel like anyone's being evil or narcissistic or conniving. I think everyone's just trying to survive, right? So I think that's important to say. And I would never go on the record um, in beef with any Vietnamese restaurateur or restaurant owner or restaurant business. I think that would just deflate any sort of efforts that we may have in terms of trying to get to the same space, trying to grow in the same space. So and then talk about the contrast for non-Vietnamese people getting into the pho space or getting into the Vietnamese food place. I have this sort of opposite thinking. I'm like, yeah, come into the space so that way I could be
Mhm.
better than you, right? Come into the
Mhm.
space. You're not going to cook. You're not going to cook better than Maya
True.
or Bawai. You're just not. Or
Yep.
go. You're not going to cook better than Gotam. Come into the space. So
Yeah.
I welcome the competition, but that just reasserts my confidence in how beautiful our food is, right?
Mhm.
I say it myself. As chef or whatever you want to call it, a top chef, whatever you want to call it. I always tell people my auntie will smoke my ass in making ban can, right? Or ban kok or ban sale, right? And that's not just my mothers and aunties. I cooked with a Shania grandmother, um, in Seattle, and she was making dosa, which is like the Indian version of ban sale. And
Mhm.
I couldn't even do it. And I worked world top restaurant. Like the thing is, like I want, um, I welcome people into the space so they could get humbled. So.
That's good. That's a good answer.
I mean, part of what we're talking about is just the economics of kitchens and workers and supplies and all of that kind of thing. And of course, that kind of world the average consumer doesn't really see. And they can't
Mm,
complain about food prices and so on and be shocked about food prices and so on. And obviously we need to have equity for everybody who's working. However, a different issue, which is about perception of value, right? So
mm,
now we're in a
Mhm.
situation in which people are like, well, if you want Japanese food, you can get the cheapest end Japanese food at a fast food chain, or you can go to Nobu and pay, I don't know what it, I've never been to Nobu, $500 a person, let's say. And no one's going to blink an eye because people understand, oh, there's a whole range and you can have great Japanese food and you can have cheap Japanese food. That's true for Korean food as well, for example. Vietnamese food, I don't know if it's quite there yet. And part of the question of perception is not simply about the inherent value of the food, it's about the perception of the people and the culture. Japan and Korea
mm.
occupy a certain position on the international stage that Vietnam is not there yet at.
Mhm.
And so, whatever we think of as the value of the food is so much driven by the perception of what Vietnam is and who the Vietnamese people are, and whether people are willing to pay a certain amount of money for it. Now, I know both of you have connections to Vietnam. I'm curious what your predictions are. Do you think Vietnamese food is going to follow in the footsteps of Japanese and Korean food, for example, not simply because of what Vietnamese American chefs are doing, but because of the transnational scene and what's happening in Vietnam as well? Does Vietnam have a shot at transforming its image so much so that one day perhaps we'll have, for better or for worse, the Vietnamese equivalent of Nobu, and people will be willing to pay that price? What do you think?
Um, yes, I know that Michelin has just gone to Vietnam for the first time last year. I have a trip to Vietnam soon, and I actually haven't been in 12 years. So it'll be my first time back since 2012. And I'm really excited to see what's going on in Vietnam. My dad moved back there a couple years ago, so he tells me things, but I'm really excited to see firsthand. I'm going to try to go eat at one of the Michelin starred restaurants while I'm there. And I think the Vietnamese cuisine has always been Michelin worthy. It is so complicated. Some of the dishes are so complicated. It takes a lot of skill to make. And there's so many ingredients and components to all of our dishes. It's so nuanced and complex. And I think that innovating those techniques is what's going to be able to make us rise to having a really, really high end Vietnamese like tasting menu. and people won't blink an eye about spending whatever, $500 a person for it. I see it following in the same path because food trends are, they follow the same lines. They kind of repeat themselves historically. So I think Vietnamese food is kind of, Vietnamese and Filipino food are the two, I think, trendy Asian up and coming cuisines that everybody is wanting to eat and try right now. Yeah, so I'm excited to see the new things in Vietnam. That place is so innovative, like that Vietnamese ingenuity is so strong. They're still like little old ladies on the corner are still coming up with new dishes there, like to sell. So I'm excited to just walk around and see that for myself and try it and getting inspired again and just watch, because I feel like I don't have a lot of access to like an old auntie making, you know, bánh rán or bánh khọt or any of those things by hand, and so that I could watch and learn. And so those little things are things that I want to see in those like fancier restaurants, because that those skills are going to get lost if they're not passed down. So yeah, I'm totally, Vietnamese food has always been like high end food to me.
Drew, what about you?
I don't care for Michelin. I don't care for the food awards. I felt like the Vietnamese people already knew that their food was delicious from the get-go, right? And the quality of your restaurant is, for me, measured on how many guests are willing to wait in line for hours to have your food, right? Um, I think that my opinion, just so I can separate out from you guys, I don't want you guys to get in trouble, but I'll take the hate. Um, my strong opinion is that once you start to go into these award accoladed system, you start to dilute, you start to anglicize. Um, you start to anglicize the food. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. I selfishly want, not good or bad, but I selfishly want to preserve Vietnamese food for what I know it to be. I want bun sao made I want bun sao made in the street stalls, you know, in Saigon, or I want to go to a coastal city and have cat, you know, gỏi cat, which are sardines basically. Sardines dressed in like a dressed with coconut and like a coconut vinegar, and you make summer rolls out of them. Um, I selfishly want that. And I think I'm maybe over romanticizing it. But that's what I want. That's what I want from food. Even though I've done tasting menus, I'm running completely away from it because I feel that over the years when I've tried to do Vietnamese food or applied it to a tasting menu, I felt like I started to lose the identity of what the Vietnamese food was. And I thought, and I'm starting to go in direction more where it's like, yeah, I worked for Daniel Boulud or X1Z, and right. But I want to put what my mom made on a pedestal right next to them. And I want to give her more weight so that way their scale drops and her rises. So, but I guess I'm a dreamer, but I don't know how realistic that is.
Well, I want to see on the tasting menu Haute Vite Long. Now, if I can see Haute Vite Long on the tasting menu, then I think we've reached a compromise. You know, you can put whatever you want on the
Right.
tasting menu, but you got to have Haute Vite Long on there. And so I think there's this whole spectrum. Like we obviously, yeah, we want to make sure the basics, or not even just the basics. We want to make sure the Vietnamese food that Vietnamese people eat are in there. But the idea of like being able to experiment and do different things, whether you call it a tasting menu or whether you call it hybrid food or fusion food or whatever, there's that range of possibilities that's actually quite exciting. Okay, last question from me before we go to Philip. But what is your favorite Vietnamese food to eat and to make? Maybe I assume they may be totally different things. And what is your favorite Vietnamese food to eat and to make?
So we talked about canh chua earlier, but my family is from the north too. We're from Hanoi, and the canh chua that I think about is canh dưa chua, which is made out of the pickled fermented mustard green instead of the fish and the pineapple. So canh chua to me, when I think of that dish, it's the mustard greens and the pork, and it's the canh and the rice. And eating that with tikka is like my favorite combo. Yeah. And I like making tikka, gà kho, like cá kho, all of that. Like that is probably my favorite thing to actually make, because I like making the nước màu, because it's like that's what I feel connects me to my ancestors, is like that part where you burn the sugar, and then adding the meat and the garlic and the smells. And that the act of making thịt kho is my favorite Vietnamese dish to make. It reminds me of my mom. I helped her make that dish countless times. And especially you got to use pork belly, because, the fat bite is so important. Like every other, like I love the texture of pork fat, just like like the skin is some of my favorite textures of pork and stuff. So those are mine.
I'm the father of an 11-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I have to say that one of the big pleasures of my life is introduce them gradually to Vietnamese food and see them gradually be won over. So they already know how to eat the pho and the banh mi, but they're starting to learn to eat other things as well, and that's just really gratifying to see. And the
Yeah.
other thing is they can't eat until they say "I'm hungry" in Vietnamese. They can cook some Vietnamese.
Nice trick.
All right, so what is your favorite Vietnamese food to eat and to make?
For me, it's yao muong. I think yao muong is such a staple in Southeast Asian countries, and it makes me feel Southeast Asian. It makes me feel brown, right? It's the stuff that you really can't get in restaurants, and a lot of people don't know this, but I've encountered and worked with Central Valley of California. Think Merced, Fresno, everything in between, of brown Southeast Asian marginalized farmers who grow that and ship their produce all up and down the West Coast to Vietnamese, Korean, East Asian, Korean, Thai. So that's Korean, Thai, Chinese, Cambodian, and Vietnamese grocery markets up and down the West Coast, and they grow it in Fresno. It's at the farmers market. It goes all the way up to Seattle, all the way down to San Diego, and they're right in the middle. And it's through their effort, through their tireless effort to even show up in H Mart. H Mart's buying from them as well too. But
Wow.
it's you could boil it down to like just like a few, like not even a dozen farmers in the Central Valley who grow all this water spinach because it needs high heat, lots of water, right? And
It
the
grows
lengths
here too, yeah.
yeah, but the lengths that they go to grow it, I think depending on what the state that you're in, the United States government considers it a weed. So if you grow it, you have to confine the water spinach so it doesn't grow everywhere. And then I think that's a tangent to another story where I think the Vietnamese people survived many wars because of water spinach, because it grows in massive lengths in the span of 24 hours. I think the reference was 6 feet in 24 in about a day's time. Right. So water
Wow.
spinach it could block up your sewage system, your waterways, but the Southeast Asian, if not the East Asian people included, found it to be a crop of sustenance. And I feel like it's things like that help their health and balance. Here in the United States, Asian Americans, we have overconsumption of animal fat and rice, and we are removed from those like very iconic Asian ingredients that helps not just give us our vitamins, iron, and zinc, but it gives us fiber, right, to help us um, slow down or decrease our glucose spike when we're eating all that rice, right? So that's the magic there. So, um, yeah.
Dude, I feel that coming from a family with a history of like diabetes and like heart disease,
Yes.
like it's real. Yeah, I mean, especially like thinking about like how a lot of like what we have accessible to us here in the US and as displaced people in the diaspora is not wasn't really like meant for us, right? And how folks were able to like survive, adapt, innovate. I want to know how y'all do that through your menus. And like where is it that y'all source your ingredients? Like how do you put it together? What's the inspiration behind it? Who are you paying homage to? Um, and I'm gonna go to you for sang no la. And even the word sang, right? Like which one you talking
Yeah,
about, you know? Yeah.
yeah.
Mm,
I'm talking about like sang la, like the color green.
Mm.
The color green represents kind of the freshness of the cuisine for me because I really try to have the lettuce and the fresh herb platter with a lot of stuff that I cook. It was like making the little lettuce wrap with the herbs and like bun hai is kind of like one of
Mm.
my favorite little meals. So I wanted to name my pop-up sun because I felt like that the color green really represented the cuisine, and it's got a play on my name too, so it's just like
Mm.
my name with an X in front of it. um, but yeah, I kind of use my pop-up more as a creative outlet than a thing that I want to do all the time, because I owned a restaurant in Portland. I owned Tapalaya for about 3 years. I worked there for 7 years before I bought it. That place
Mm.
was the place that I cut my teeth. That was where I started fusing Vietnamese and Cajun food. Living in Portland, there was not a lot of Cajun food up there. There was actually a lot of really good Vietnamese food up there, but I was missing home so bad when I got there. I didn't think I would end up living there for 12 years, but I think because I started melding my Cajun roots and my Vietnamese roots together in the food that I was cooking, it really helped me to feel at home there, ironically. But so my mom's favorite uh, one of her favorite Cajun dishes was gumbo. So I make a lot of different Vietnamese inspired gumbos and like stews and stuff. So my most recent gumbo experiment I call fumbo, and it is gumbo made with pho broth. And I've been doing it with duck lately. So I make duck pho, and then I shred the meat, and then I make a Cajun style gumbo out of the pho broth, and I add a little bit of five spice to my broth, and then I also use the Cajun seasoning. I find that five spice and Cajun seasoning really like enhance each other because the five spice
Mm.
is more like sweet and the Cajun spice is more like spicy, salty, and it kind of like really goes together. And it's not something that you would think of, but when you taste it, it's like all these familiar flavors to me, but still is gumbo, you know? I like to serve it with fun noodles, like to really make it a hybrid dish. Um, so it's really good. I've had really good feedback. Another thing I do is like a Vietnamese style crawfish etouffee. It's inspired by bún riêu, and it's like I use a roux and I use Trinity, but then I also add the fermented shrimp paste to it, lime juice, fish sauce, lemongrass, but also Cajun seasoning, crystal hot sauce. Like all of these ingredients go so well together for my palate because I was used to my mom also making the same food. Like she would make Cajun food, but she would just make it with the Vietnamese ingredients that we already had in the kitchen. So when she would make her red beans, she always put fish sauce in her red beans. She would use sometimes she would put like the Chinese sausage in in the red beans instead of regulars, like
Ooh.
yeah, like the lap suong. Like she would make lap suong and like put it with the red beans and rice, and that was pretty bomb. So like yeah, my food is inspired by the food that my mother cooked, even though it's fusion. You know, she just naturally did that because of where she was, and she was always a very adventurous eater, and she was always doing projects like I just talked about lap suong. She had like a whole summer where she experimented with making lapsang, and her hands were always pink. And like, you know, so I feel like I get the fusion naturally from my mom already. And living in a place like New Orleans, there's so many cultures that are melding here all the time. It's kind of just like the spirit of the city, and everyone around you is doing it. All the chefs here are melding all the flavors with, you know, it's like the pop-up scene here is really grown so fast since COVID started. It really didn't exist before COVID. Like And then that gave it the opportunity to explode. So now you can find, like, everybody's doing fusion flavors, and it's so amazing to see. Yeah.
Thanks, Chef Anh. I dropping some links here in the chat, but looks like we got to plan a field trip to NOLA. Check out
Yeah.
the food tour with you. Yeah,
Can
I
I
mean you're
just point out that bánh mì, like I was like, man, the shrimp patty, yep.
is that
The shrimp patty.
it's not on your menu yet, Chef Thu at GiGi's? Can you tell us a little bit about this restaurant you opened this year? What's on the
We gotta
menu?
get
How'd you come up with it?
we gotta host you at Gigi's. I think it'd be a great collab. You know, I think people would love it out there,
Yeah, I
out in
would
San
love to come
Francisco.
out there. Yes,
Cool.
definitely.
Sorry, Phil, I just had to see that you were saying about Gigi's.
No, yeah. I mean, that helps like answer one of as we move into Q&A too. Like we got a bunch of questions from the audience like Vivian was like, is there a collaborative pop-up in the near future between the both of y'all? Right.
Yes, hopefully. I'm down.
Non-negotiable, yes, non-negotiable. We gotta make it happen.
But yeah, I mean like how can you walk us a little bit through like your menu, how you came like how you curated it, what you're bringing to the table, food and drink? Because the wine bar, right?
Yeah, it's a wine bar. We have the beverage person, Justin Chin over at Spruce. He's on the edge of being a master somm. There's only a few master somms in the nation. He's curating the wine program along with my really good friend, longtime colleague, um, Michael Madison. She is heading as a general manager and curating the wine experience. Them together, they come with a wealth of fun wine knowledge, right? They're doing old world wines.
Mm.
She has a hyper focus of the border regions of France and Germany. So a lot of the ice vine, you know, a lot of the whites, a lot of the sparkles there. In addition to that, we're doing New World North American wine. And I feel that I've always been a fan of Meow when my mom hosted it, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
let's be I want to be accurate though. The first hour, right? After the first hour, it gets crazy. Kids are gone.
Yeah.
Honestly, I only like the first hour because that's when people were still nice, right? They weren't as drunk. Right. I've always loved Yao food, not because I liked alcohol or I did like alcohol, but the fact that there are so many nuanced flavors that I found cultural bridges into other cultures, kind of like Spain and tapas, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
going over
Yeah.
into dim sum or
Mm-hmm.
even like Vietnamese kaiseki. I mean, Japanese kaiseki, right? Where I feel that there's so many different techniques of a hyper focus on the ingredients because it's isolated away from the rice. And you have
Yeah.
things like gà tai chan, mò tai chan, everything in
Yeah.
between, goiga, whatever, right? Shrimp chips were big at Nyao, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the chicken feet salad, the peanuts, toasted peanuts, cashews, everything in between. I've always been enamored with that cuisine, and I always thought I never saw it in the States here as a
Mm-hmm.
serious place. You would find them in like the little Saigons where they serve a lot of beer and Henny. Not hating on that, but I always wanted to kind of to do a study of it and then match it along uh, sort of a very disciplined wine program. But at the same time, not requiring people wear blazers to go in and have a good glass of wine, right? Keeping it low key. You get a glass of wine for $15, and then we're playing 1980s, 1990s Whitney and Mariah Carey up in there because
Heck
you know I
yeah.
keep it real. I think the thing was that um, we felt San Francisco needed it. San Francisco was evolving to a place where I felt like I didn't, my business partners and I, we didn't see our identities ingrained in it anymore. And although unintentional, we created the space so we could be like, this is who we are. We're Asian American, right? And as Asian Americans in San Francisco, Chinatown, complimenting Brandon Jew over at Mr. Jews as well, too. This is what he does. We are Asian Americans and we are in diaspora. We're influenced by everything around us. To the Italian neighborhood in the Sunset District, to the Richmond, to Fisherman's Wharf, to Chinatown, to Japantown, and even Black Harlem, which we call Fillmore, right, in San Francisco. Leaning into that, keeping it real, and I think selfishly making us feel seen and inviting other people to come to it to see that this is what San Francisco is about from our perspective. So, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out the concept, and it came together fairly quickly, and I think it's exciting. And um, we have a hot dog on the menu, a Wagyu hot dog on the menu that was inspired by the Costco hot dog.
That's
Right?
awesome.
Like I'm keeping it real, like $1.50, you get a drink and a hot dog, but sort of inspired by that, right? Garnish with your mother's pantry, right? Keeping it real.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because you bought more than one hot dog. Your mom, she bought a hot dog to eat there. She brought another one to bring it home because it was cheap. Right?
What is the wine pairing that goes with the Wagyu hot dog? What is the wine pairing that goes with the Wagyu hot dog?
Costco soda, 55 cents. I'm just kidding.
Costco soda. I would have to ask my wine person. I would have to ask Madison that, but I think for me, I think maybe like Saint Helena Cabernet Sauvignon. I think that washes down fairly easily. I think Saint Helena Cabernet Sauvignon. I think compared to the rest of the world, it's fruit forward. I think that goes really well with our hot dog. For reference and flavor in a hot dog, we have egg, pork floss, ginger,
Mm,
mahan ginger scallion that's
mm,
made with bacon. So it's very
mm.
fat forward. It's very umami. And then having a cab, St. Helena cab, wash that down, I think works fairly well. So, but that's just my preference. Kava goes with everything, by the way. Champagne goes with everything, no matter what anybody says.
My goodness. Yeah, it's like almost dinner time, I'm like, your boy got this leftover bun meat to still keep it coming. But we got some questions from the audience. I want to ask the one from Tina Pham, who asked, like, what's a dish like from the Viet diaspora that you grew to love and maybe didn't grow up eating, like something that you discovered or uncovered through this lifetime.
For
Oh,
me or for Ron? Sorry.
Uh, uh, Chef, do you seem ready?
Is it for me or is it for both of
It's
us?
for both. It's for both. It's for both. Both of y'all. Both of y'all.
I want you to go first. I think you're going to respond.
so wait, the question was, what's my favorite dish? Not necessarily Vietnamese.
Like what's something that from the Vietnamese, like that is Vietnamese, that you maybe
Oh,
didn't grow up eating, that you're like, oh snap, like that's hella good.
so my family was Northern, and I feel like most of the Vietnamese food in America is Southern food. So like I I I I feel like canh chua cá was not something we ate all the time, and when it wasn't as sweet or sour, and we made it with a lot of dill. So like I feel like canh chua cá with like the pineapple and the tamarind and everything was kind of a thing that I ate later on that I noticed was more like a southern Vietnamese dish. Yeah, so I like my mom really never made that style canh chua cá, and I really enjoy it now, like with the tomato, the pineapple, okra, bean sprouts. That's not something that we put in our soup growing up, but like I just made it for my last pop up, and so I had been grubbing on it a little bit and recently
Yeah.
and I made it in the southern style. So on purpose because that's not the style that I grew up eating. So yeah, it's such a simple dish, but that's something that I kind of have rediscovered, but like the southern way instead of the northern way.
I
Yeah.
just
I
want to
feel like I
jump.
know where this.
I
Oh
want to
yeah, go
jump
ahead,
in
Faye.
here while Do thinks of his answer. Elk for me. I didn't grow up eating elk, which is snails.
Oh, I love
Okay.
it.
And then the first time I
Oh,
ever heard of snails was probably like escargot. And then I had
yeah.
escargot
Uh-huh.
when I was early in college, and I thought, this is disgusting. It's so creamy, buttery, whatever. But then eating Vietnamese elk with, a dipping sauce that's probably Nuc Jam based in some way, I thought,
Mhm.
this is so much better than French escargot. And maybe I'm biased or whatever, but it's just, again, we talk about the bias in terms of food, and somehow the French make eating snails acceptable, but the Vietnamese snails are so much better.
Mm.
So good.
That's crazy that you said out and earlier you said Hove Long, because there's both things that you can eat with raw rum,
I
and
mean,
Hmm.
look,
have
goes
and
back to
enjoy
this
with the
idea
Heineken.
that Ramon is an invasive weed, according to the federal government, a noxious weed.
Yeah.
And I'm
Mm.
thankful that Dope brought that up. It's a great metaphor for Vietnamese people. We're a noxious weed. We have survived. Wherever we go, we endure and we spread all over everything. And
Yes.
things like Hot Vietnam and oak, that this is stuff that's garbage, right? This is stuff that you you find out in the barnyard or in the fields and whatever. But that the rau muống that keeps us alive. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Do
Yeah.
I hear a new TikTok slang coming on for this new younger Vietnamese generation? You're being hella yao mong right now, bro.
You being hella rumble.
Yeah, being hella yao mong.
Dude, I kind of see where this question is coming from though, because Tina also asked this question about like, what's your favorite way to prepare bitter melon or khổ qua?
Yeah.
It's almost that. But Chef Tu, something that you came to appreciate now that you didn't before.
Anchovies. We had a Korean neighbor who spoke fluent Vietnamese growing up, and I had no idea she was Korean because she spoke fluent Vietnamese. And she served us Korean food. And I thought for the longest time, up until my adulthood, I think about 18, 19 years old before I went to culinary school, that she was cooking us Vietnamese food. I had no idea she was Korean because she never spoke to me in Korean. She only spoke to me in Vietnamese. And naturally, so as a kid,
Mm.
if somebody speaks to you in your native language, you would assume that they're of that country of origin. And if she's cooking food speaking your native language, you would think the same. So one of the dishes that I love the most that she made was that she would do gekam, but the Korean way. She would do it's dried anchovies,
Mm.
and then they'll toast it with sesame oil, and it's slightly sweetened because it's a sweet tier. And then you would just kind of pour it over your rice, an obnoxious amount, and then have it with a heaping spoonful of hot rice, and like that slightly sweet, slightly salty, super crunchy anchovy bite. Ever since I was a kid, I compared and contrasted to bacon, right?
Mm.
And to me, I always referenced it as bacon of the sea, and I always asked my mom to make it. And it was so interesting, I always reference that because it serves a reminder to me that there are cultural bridges um in food, in language, and people can hit that same note of deliciousness no matter where you come from. And
Mhm.
that sort of same thinking brought me into, volunteer work in San Quentin prison, working with the incarcerated men. People think that there's an intelligence level that's associated with deliciousness. And that's what I hate about um, not all, but certain food rating systems, is that you have to be qualified, you have to be educated, you have to be nuanced enough to be understand the subtleness of taste. That's why it's delicious. I think that's complete bullshit. You know, I believe um, uh, things that taste delicious is an innate thing. It's an instinctual thing. And if you could find what chefs are supposed to do is you find the happy medium where everyone loves it. It's more about the chef hitting those notes opposed to the person understanding what they're eating. Right?
Mm.
It's like music, right? You don't need to be a genius to understand and appreciate Beethoven, nor do you need to be a genius to understand and love Tupac, right? It's either you like it or you don't. Right?
Word. Damn, I just want to thank y'all, and thank y'all in the audience for sticking around with us, through the hunger. And if you have a moment to check out our survey, we're gonna go one last one from the audience, and then I'll pass it back to you, Viet. But from Lan Lam Lum, she asked for both chefs, is there a dish that, if popularized, would signal a change in the way that Viet food is perceived in the US? Like, is there something avant-garde or in the fringes and the margins that, when that dish makes into the mainstream, like we would have that's it right there. We would have made it from y'all's perspectives.
Hmm. I have to think about that
Sayawan,
one. So,
bum mam. Boom mum
Mm.
is so stinky,
mhm.
funky. You complain about it that it's in your house for the next few days for making it, but so worth it and delicious. I love boom mum.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
to me, the ingredients don't make sense, right? In terms of like, what you see in the Western tradition kitchen. But I
Yeah.
believe Boom Mom has like crispy pork belly and then an eggplant. Like how did those come together? But in the most strangest and most beautiful way, it comes together, right? And then Mum Tam on top of that,
Yeah,
right?
I was
Make
thinking
it
that
more funky,
too.
right? Make it more funky, spicy.
Mm.
So
Yeah. I don't know, like a dish that I ate more than probably other Vietnamese kids was Viet-Cajun, and that
Oh.
was because my mom would like buy fresh ducks and like bleed them herself and make like real thịt canh out of that. And I don't think it's legal to serve that here, but they do make it. They do make it at the Tết festival at the church here every year, and I think it's made with goat. It's there, but like I feel like if that dish ever became legal to serve, and white people are eating it, enjoying it, like we've made it for sure.
Hey, before you go, Viet, I was gonna add, we've been we were talking about northern food, southern food. We haven't really mentioned Hue food or Mincun food yet. So I would say when the banana wrapped foods make it, that's I feel like when the Vietnamese tamales, the bun bok lok, the bun la, bun nam, like when people are gonna work for their Vietnamese food, I feel like that's when maybe we would have made it.
Okay, so that means we have to have another episode, but I just want to ask one last really quick question because we haven't asked this question yet. What is a Vietnamese food that you have not dared to eat? I'll start off. I was in a restaurant in Vietnam and probably in Saigon, and I thought I could eat everything. They brought out a dish of live silkworm larvae, still wriggling, about the size of a finger, wriggling in a puddle of nước mắm. I could not eat it, I confess. Anh Luu, what is a Vietnamese dish that you dare not eat?
I'm a super, super adventurous eater. I will say I will try anything twice, just, to make sure. I think maybe that like live wriggly silkworm dish sounds like something that would be hard for me, but I don't know. I can't think of a Vietnamese dish that I wouldn't eat. I mean, I'm not scared of the stanky, and I'm not scared of like raw. So I don't know. I have no idea.
All right. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, I like all that stuff.
So have you ever encountered a Vietnamese dish, traditional or not traditional, that you have not been able to eat?
I have a love-hate relationship with the cuisine that Vietnamese men bring about, especially with Yao, because they'll hunt weird shit, right? Unethical animals, like near the extinction. They'd be like, "Hey, you want to eat this?" Um, so I would like to think that I'm an adventurous eater, but I favor more towards um, seafood and vegetables. So anything seafood and vegetables, I'll eat. If I could just add too, like, let's talk about the moonshine culture in Vietnamese culture. Like, it gets pretty ridiculous. Like, I've heard of stories of people making moonshine out of garage and putting weird animals, like cobra snakes, like, into their moonshine to make it more potent, and people going blind from drinking it. And mind you, these stories are mixed. It's not all from Vietnam. It's both the United States and Vietnam. So
It's not even a laughing matter because tourists
yeah.
just died in Laos because their
Mm,
moonshine was laced with something that should not have been in there. All
yeah,
right.
it's
Philip, is there a Vietnamese dish you have not dared to eat?
I've never been to Vietnam, but I don't think I would eat dog. Only because I was born in the year of the dog, and I feel like that's like, sacrilegious.
Well, I did go
yeah,
to the dog restaurants in Hanoi. 7 courses of dog. I ate 2 out of 7. The third one, I was like, nah, I've had enough.
yeah,
Drawing the line
yeah.
right there. Well, on that note, thanks so much to our guests that have been here talking to us about Vietnamese cuisine, traditional and modern, from Vietnam to the diaspora. We have been so delighted to have Anh Luu here from New Orleans. If you're in New Orleans, you can catch her at her pop-up Sang No La, but she will also come to you. So find her on the net. If you want her to cook for you, she's available. And we are delighted to have Chef Tu David Phu here from the Bay Area. If you're in San Francisco, check out his new wine bar, GiGi's. If you're not in San Francisco, check out his new book, which I was very happy to blurb. It is a cookbook that is called The Memory of Taste that he co-wrote with Soleil Ho, San Francisco Chronicle's food and
Amazing.
culture critic. It's been a great show. Thanks to all of you, and we will see you at your restaurants.